Well, chapter 9 is about evangelists, those who have a special task in the church of sharing the gospel with those who don't believe. Now, there's so much that could be said about the evangelist. I mean, there are entire books written on it. But there are just a few things I try and draw people's attention to. The first is that the word evangelist in Greek is simply the word gospel with a different ending that means gospel, right? It's not anything scary. It just means someone who has a dedicated ministry of telling the gospel, gospeling others. So although we often think of, the great evangelists, the Billy Grahams of the world, or the Ravi Zacharias or whatever, when we think the word evangelist and think, oh, well, it mustn't be me. It's not really what the word itself means. It's really a whole bunch of people who are given by Christ to the church simply to tell the gospel. The other really interesting thing is, in the New Testament, you do find itinerant evangelists, people who run around the Mediterranean telling the gospel, but you also find what you might call local evangelists, people who are gospelers in one church or in a small group of churches, who have a sort of dedicated ministry of sharing the gospel for small communities. I think that's really important to understand, because evangelists, I think today, we needn't think of them as just travelling. But I also think that churches should be thinking about employing evangelists, or small clusters of churches in a given area employ people who have the particular talent of sharing the gospel with those who don't yet believe. There's another thing I want to say about evangelists. Very simple. We're not all evangelists. We're not all evangelists. Now, I know the idea of every Christian being an evangelist has a lovely pedigree. And I understand its sentiment, and I agree with the sentiment. We've all got to be involved in doing what we can, given our personality and circumstances, to get the gospel out to our friends and neighbours. But that's not what the New Testament means when it uses this particular word, evangelist. It's got a special meaning, and only some of us are evangelists. You see this, I think, particularly in Ephesians 4, where the apostle says that Christ has given the church some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, some to be pastor teachers. Some. And he then goes on to say, so that the church may be built up and the people of God prepared to do works of service. So the evangelist, just like the apostle or the prophet or the teacher, is a particular function within the church, whose particular function in building up the church is to evangelize, to tell others the gospel. And I think it can be not just a Billy Graham figure, but someone who's just a regular kind of character. I know in my own church some years ago, we had this young guy called Tim, who was actually a boat builder, which is a great job to have in Sydney. And he was, really great with non-Christians. His friendships with non-Christians were just really natural, beautiful. He was passionate about reaching out to others. And when he spoke about Jesus, he was really clear. I don't mean he was super articulate or extroverted. I just mean when he talked about Jesus' life, death and resurrection, it just sounded so simple. So on a hunch, we invited him to come and do some more evangelism training. So we got Tim to sit in on one of these courses for inquirers wanting to know about Jesus, just to learn how it ran. And then we got him to run his own course with a whole bunch of inquirers. And by the end, he'd led people to Christ. He followed them up for several months, then he ran another course, led more people to Christ. Tim, the boat builder, was very clearly Tim, the evangelist. Now, he wasn't an employee of the church, but he was one of about 10 people in our church that we gave a dedicated ministry to, of leading people to know about Jesus. And frankly, it was just such a great success. People like Tim are the very people Paul speaks of in Ephesians 4, whom Christ has given to the church for the specific task of gospeling.